Two most talented teams on one field in the regular season for 2021. That's what I've been saying for a long time, and that's what I think we're going to get when we see Clemson and Georgia get it on in Charlotte, September 4th. College Football Nation will be watching. So until that time, we'll be talking. And we got Palmer Toms from Dogs 247 Sports. We got Brian Knight, a.k.a. Bobby Durkins, right here on YouTube. And, of course, Jason Priester is joining us as well. Good to see Jason coming on here from Clemson SI. Gentlemen, how we doing?
I guess I'll break the silence. I'm doing great.
You're doing well? Doing well. Good. Good. Sorry, Palmer, we doubled you up 2-1. I figured you could handle it.
Hey, I'm all here for it. I'm doing well down here in Athens, and excited to see this matchup that we got here in less than 2 weeks.
Awesome. Jason, how are we doing today? Oh, Jason, we can't hear you. That makes it 1 versus 1. I know you want to keep things even, but we do want to hear from you at some point. Can't hear you. Can anybody else hear Jason? We can't hear him, right?
Okay. How about now?
Oh, there you are.
That's what happens. Right. That's what happens when you're running late. Sorry about that, man.
Oh, that's all right. I know. I got you guys started late, so blame me. All right. We invite everyone to leave their comments, questions, and debate topics right there in the live chat regarding any kind of matchups, anything regarding Georgia and Clemson. Of course, you can talk college football all you want and whatever other games you want to talk about, other teams, but we will only talk Georgia, Clemson here. Brian, since you've got the least amount of time, I believe, let's start with you. I believe, if I'm not misquoting you, Clemson should win this game by 2 touchdowns.
I said that a couple of months ago. If they play their best game, they come out fired up. They don't come out there and play flat. I truly believe they have the talent. I believe they have the ability. I believe they have the coaching to do it. Now, is that exactly what I think is going to happen? I'll go ahead and say no. But I do believe that talent-wise, they do have the talent if you look across the board. I pulled up their roster today because there's been some changes. But when you pull up the names and who's not only starters, who's second, who's third string, man, this is an incredible football team. But then again, you're playing Georgia. Georgia wants this game. This is a game, and I believe I can speak for Jason and the other gentleman, Palmer. Am I right? Yeah. Yes. This is a game that should be played every year. A worst case scenario every other year. I know we're starting to get it on the schedule, but to me, this is good for college football, especially with chances that maybe we could end up in the same conference, which I have absolutely no problem with. But this is going to be a heck of a football game. A lot of recruiting. I mean, just the intersections of recruiting. I mean, this is a massive game, and I think it happens to no better 2 schools than Clemson and Georgia.
So, do we all agree on that? These 2 teams should be playing every year, or at least every other year?
Absolutely, Mark, and I'll add on to what Brian said there. I think it needs to be happening on the campuses. As much as I'm really looking forward to seeing these 2 teams on the same field in Charlotte here before too long, I really would rather see them play between the hedges and in Death Valley. I think that's, I think when Georgia fans and Clemson fans think about the matchups that these 2 teams have had in past years, it was the matchups that were, on home soil and on, enemy soil that are the ones that stand out, not necessarily the ones that have been played on neutral ground. And I know that we're scheduled here to see another one here. I believe it's 2023 in Atlanta, which I guess would be Georgia's territory more so than Clemson's, with Charlotte being more so Clemson than Georgia. But, I think, and like you said, we've got it coming here before too long. But it's going to be happening in the late 2020s. But, I would really like to be seeing these two teams playing on a regular basis and doing it as a home and home. I know you got to do these big marquee matchups and that those bring in money. But you can get just as much money from the TV side of things to have, two top 5 programs in the country playing, at their home stadiums.
Yeah, I agree. I grew up with this game being played every year. So when they went away from that was just heartbreaking in my opinion. And I agree that it's a game that should be played on the campuses. But if we can't get them on the campuses right now, I'll settle for the neutral site games. Something is better than nothing, and I'll take something this year while we're waiting, to get back to playing in Athens and playing in Clemson a few times here over the next decade.
All right. I always have to bring some kind of logic and some kind of, I got to I'm not going to say a Debbie Downer. I've never stated that in my life. I hate that cliche. But anyway, I am going to be the one to bring the pragmatics to it and squelch all the fun. Will be, well, if you're Georgia and you've got Georgia Tech and Clemson on the schedule every year, then that's pretty much your Power 5, and that makes for a boring schedule, and you never go out and schedule anybody else. If you're Clemson, you always have South Carolina, then you're going to always have Georgia on the schedule. Then who else are you going to schedule? Nobody else. It's all going to be FCS and Group of 5. So neither one of them is going to do that, and they shouldn't do that.
Well, I'll interrupt you there. Looking at it from the Georgia perspective, late in this decade, Georgia's already made a move to start scheduling 3 Power 5 opponents each season, understanding that, hey, we've got Georgia Tech at the tail end of the schedule each year. They want to get this game with Clemson happening regularly. But, you've seen Kirby Smart go out and schedule some really tough opponents, seeing that they're going to play Clemson and Ohio State in the same year, Oklahoma and Florida State, Texas. They've got matchups with Louisville and UCLA coming down the line. So I don't think that necessarily corners Georgia or Clemson into playing just these two, those 2 set Power 5 opponents, be it Georgia Tech and Clemson on the Georgia side of things, or South Carolina and Georgia on the Clemson side of things. I don't necessarily think that limits them as much as it gives them an opportunity to build on and build their strength of schedule around this marquee matchup.
All right. Very good. Let's get to the 2021 game. So they haven't played since 2014. They played in 13 and 14 and split those 2. One was really close, like 38-35, and Georgia kind of took off and left Clemson in the dust the last time they played, 45-21. I think Todd Gurley had a big night in that one. All right. We move it ahead to 2021, Brian. Last time we talked Clemson was probably 6 weeks ago, something in that range. Has anything happened in the last 6 weeks to make you feel better or worse about your team? And how do you feel about Clemson coming into this one?
So far, really no injuries on our side. The big question mark, of course, is if DJ was to go down. And I think for anybody who's kind of just a drive-by college football fan, you know the top teams: Bama, Clemson, Ohio State. I think the whole Oklahoma high ratings that I see, I think that's to sell magazines or something, because we all know what's going to happen to Oklahoma. They're going to get punched in the face like they normally do in the college football playoff if they make it there, because they still haven't figured out you got to have a defense to contend. With that said, and I'll leave my Oklahoma rant there. I know that a lot of people sees that Trevor's gone. I think Jason would probably agree with me. I've never been more comfortable in my entire life handing the keys of the car to a first timer as Clemson is right now with DJ. DJ's brilliant. He's smart. He is hardworking. He's got all the intangibles. He's got the things that you just can't teach. So I think on a Clemson football side, we're very happy about that. Problem is, if DJ were to go down, what happens? Now, Tyson Fomacha, I know they got hurt. I know he's getting better and so on, but not trying to be a jerk here. I wasn't impressed with Fomacha. I think he would definitely be better than our backups that we have right now, but not much. If I was Georgia, I'd pin my ears back. I would come after him with the kitchen. I mean, heck, I'd pick up Kirby Smart and throw him at him. I mean, I'd be coming after him with everything that he's got. And I think he would. I think he wouldn't do that well. Of course, we lost ETN, but anybody who's paying attention to us knows that Lynn J. Dixon has sat in the shadows of one of the greatest running backs to ever play, not only in the ACC, I think in college football. And Lynn J. Dixon is amazing. We have a full running back stable. Georgia's always historically been a fantastic running back stable, but I'm seeing more and more good news come out about the offensive line. That's really big for us. And you know me, I have beat this dead horse till I don't want to even hear about it anymore. I just want to see our safety play step up. I believe let me tell you the names for anybody who's kind of familiar with our team, who's on our defensive line. Defensive line. We have Miles Murphy, all-world freshman, Brian Brissett, Tyler Davis, Justin Foster. Glad Justin Foster came back. This guy was going to leave football. He came back. I'm so happy for that kid. Xavier Thomas. I could keep going. Another guy that I can't pronounce his name, Rook. I'll leave it at that. Justin Maskell, KJ Henry, Darnell Jeffries. We have a lot of talent at that line position. We can just keep sending these guys in and out. And Jason, you've been a Clemson fan and an expert for many, many years. I want you to think about this. If Darnell Jeffries was playing for us 15 years ago, this guy would be one of the top players on the team. He's just got that ability and that talent. We've got a lot of good things going on at the linebacker position. But for me, I'm not worried about our corners. I am concerned about our safety play. I want to see how our offensive line responds. But there was something that Skalski said this week in an interview with one of the publications. And I understand football talk. I understand football lingo. But for me, even for this, I even kind of threw up in my mouth for a second when I read it. We're talking about the Ohio State game. That was the last big stage we were on. It was the last game we played. We come out of that, and we come into this massive game with Georgia. And it should be a massive game. I'm glad that both of us don't suck. This is a really good game. But he said we did not want that game enough. And that is one of the things that you've heard me say in the past 2 years. I am not seeing a hunger with Clemson like we normally saw, in my opinion. We kind of transitioned from the Roy bus. We came in, won 2 national championships. We're getting incredible recruits. Now we're at a place where I believe that Dabo Swinney's having to grow as a coach. He's having to change some of the things within the culture to where we are a premier program. There's no more the world is against us. No, the world's not against you. So I really just want to see if that mindset can change, because that really bothered me that he said we really didn't want that game. I want it enough. I get what he's saying, but I still wouldn't have verbalized that. But if we can be fired up and we can get especially the play at safety nailed down, I really feel good about this unit. Our wide receiver room is unbelievable. As I said, the running backs, unbelievable. Our tight ends, we're 3 or 4 deep. These guys are fantastic. Our cornerbacks, we have some great cornerbacks. To me, Andrew Booth could easily be our Derek Stingley. If we wanted to put him out and put him at punt return, if we wanted to throw the ball to him, he's that type of player. But we have so much talent. I'm glad to see Justin Ross back. I think any true Clemson fan is any true college football fan is happy to see him back. So I feel really good, even right down to the kicking team with Spires and Potter. But I just want to see the intensity out of Clemson, because I'm going to tell you, if they come out even semi-flat, Georgia wins. They win by 10 plus. If Clemson comes out, they play solid football. I'll go ahead and give it away because I'll have to go here in a few. I call Clemson wins by 3 or 4 points, maybe a touchdown.
Yeah, it's hard to add on to that, man. You kind of hit on everything right there. I think along the same lines as you do. I think the 2 biggest things I want to see from Clemson, the 2 biggest questions I have are that offensive line, in particular on the interior, who's going to start at center, and those safeties, man. They got beat like a drum last year in that Ohio State game, and they got beat in some of those other games too. But I've been to some of the practices and I've seen Landon Sanders. He looks like a different dude this year, man. You can tell he's been in the weight room. He's been putting in the work. So we know he's doing that. The question is, does that translate onto the field? we won't know that until they start playing games. But I have big questions about the safeties, like you do, and that offensive line. Outside of that, this Clemson team's deep. They're deep at most every position outside of cornerback. I think they got 6 corners, but there's 6 really good corners. As long as they can keep them healthy, they ought to be in very good shape. I think Andrew Booth's got the potential to be a first-round draft pick next year. He's that good. He's just got to stay healthy. He struggles staying healthy some. If they can keep him healthy, keep him on the field, and those safeties can be serviceable at best, this can be a very, very scary defense with that defensive line you were just talking about.
Palmer, run down these injuries in this Georgia situation. How impactful are these injuries? And of course, you know, you're not there to be able to get a great assessment on the injuries. You can only go on what's being stated to the media. But in regards to as much as you can gather, and based on what you know of the depth in those positions, obviously, and backing up those particular players, how impactful are these injuries as best you can estimate?
Yeah, there's a little bit of conflicting reports here on some of Georgia's injuries. And, you know, some people are reporting that the 2 most recent being Darnell Washington, sophomore tight end, and transfer that they brought in from West Virginia, Tyke Smith in the secondary. Both of them suffered foot injuries last week at practice. And initially it was reported that they would be out 3 to 4 weeks, maybe up to 6, which would have them, the 3 to 4 week timeline would have them missing the opener. That's kind of the timeline that I'm basing my judgment on this game around, because I do think that that's ultimately going to be closer to the timeline that we're going to be watching Georgia anxiously awaiting their return. You know, Kirby Smart came out Saturday, said that he believes that his team will be at full strength come the game. The initial report said those guys were day to day. However, Kirby Smart has you know, called some injuries day to day from mid-season till the end of the season, and we've never seen that guy play again. And so, you know, under my assumption here, I'm saying Georgia will be missing Darnell Washington. Georgia will be missing Tyke Smith. I think Smith is probably the bigger of the 2 injuries, given the questions that Georgia has in the secondary, replacing so many guys that headed to the NFL, a couple that transferred out as well. You know, and that star position being so important in Kirby Smart's defense, I think that the expectation was that Tyke Smith was going to step in and fill that role immediately. And now they're having to look further down the line. I do think that Georgia's got a great second option there in Latavius Brini. There was some talks that you know, those 2 guys were probably both going to play the position in the single game. You know, there was no clear-cut winner of that competition. And Georgia has a history of playing 2 stars. Last year they played Mark Webb and Tyreek Stevenson at the position. So there's no reason that they couldn't play 2 stars with Tyke Smith or Latavius Brini. Now with Smith potentially out for the game, I would say doubtful at this point. You know, I think it's going to be Brini. And he played in the bowl game. He played in the last couple of games of the season. And you know, played well. I think that he's a guy that is, you know, he's been around the program for a while now. He's been behind Mark Webb and Tyreek Stevenson, to Mark Webb being someone that was there for 4 years. Stevenson, someone that came in as a 5-star and played right away. And now he's transferred out to Miami. So I think Brini stepping in at safety at star is going to be big for them. And it's also big for Georgia that they return Chris Smith and Lewis Cine at safety. I think, you know, with the questions that they have at cornerback, replacing 3 guys at that position, with the now question that they have at star, having to replace a guy that they probably were counting on to step in and play a big role immediately, having that back end of the secondary, back end of your defense shored up, and knowing what you've got there is huge, because it's important for those, you know, the communication in the secondary, especially when you're going up against a passing game like this. You know, it's going to be a big for the communication of the secondary to have those 2 guys, 2 veterans there in Lewis Cine and Chris Smith. You know, and then in terms of Darnell Washington's injury, I don't think it's as big of a deal as the Smith injury. It does hurt Georgia's passing game, because I think he was going to be a big part of the game this year. And Georgia wants to get those tight ends more involved. And when you've got a 6'7", 280-pound tight end, it's almost like you're running LeBron James out there at tight end. He's hard to bring down. You saw that in the Peach Bowl against Cincinnati. And you saw it in the spring game against Georgia's first string defense. He was running over guys, making guys look foolish. And so, to me, that is a loss that's going to hurt. But I do think, he will be back for Georgia after this game. And Georgia's got options at that tight end room. John Fitzpatrick is a guy that caught a touchdown pass last year and has started several games primarily as a blocking tight end, but has shown that he can be involved in the passing game. And then Brock Bowers is a guy that they're bringing in, highly rated recruit out of California. He's a guy that they really are excited about using in different ways, moving him around in the field, in the backfield, giving the ball to him on a jet sweep or something. He's a guy that Georgia fans are really excited about. Kirby Smart is really excited about, this entire coaching staff. We spoke with Todd Monken earlier, offensive coordinator Todd Monken, earlier in the preseason, and he's super excited about the ways that they can use Brock Bowers. He said it's their job to find ways to get him the ball and find ways to utilize his skill set. So I think those are the two big injuries. Warren Erickson on the offensive line is another one that hurts. There at center, he injured his snapping hand, missed the first scrimmage, but did participate in the second scrimmage. He's got the ability to snap with either hand, so you can put a cast on his I think he snaps with his left hand, so you can put a cast on his left hand and have him snap with his right. Georgia was also not settled at that center position in the first place, and so they very likely are going to end up going with Cedric Van Pran, former number 1 center in the country in the 2020 signing class. He played in 4 games last season, and the coaches are very high on his development. Obviously Georgia's going to be without George Pickens, who tore his ACL in the spring. I think all college football fans are hopeful that he can get back on the field at some point this fall, just because of, for Georgia's sake, what he brings to the passing game. But for college football fans' sake, just the excitement that he can bring to the field in various ways. And then Eric Gilbert is another guy that Georgia is potentially going to be without. He's dealing with some personal issues. He was kind of expected to be that replacement in the passing game for the loss of Pickens. His status is up in the air, and we're learning more about that by the day. But I guess mentally I'm kind of counting him out because Georgia's been without him for 2 scrimmages now. So they're getting used to what a passing game without him is going to look like. Jermaine Burton is going to have to step up, and he's really going to have to step up all year long, take that leap as a sophomore that a lot of fans are expecting to see. Kyrus Jackson is a guy who had his knees scoped and has been working his way back. He's been involved in both scrimmages in a non-contact uniform. I would imagine that black jersey is coming off for a red one here before too long, and that he very likely will be on the field. My money would be on him being on the field for that first snap of the game. Arian Smith is a guy in the passing game that they're excited about. So Georgia's got some injuries. They're a banged-up football team right now, but I think that's the result of a physical camp. I take what Kirby Smart said with a grain of salt there, that I do think that they will get some of these guys back. I don't know that they will get all of them back. It's going to be interesting to follow those stories here in the coming weeks and as the game approaches. And I certainly think but I certainly think regardless of who is out there and who's not, Georgia's got the talent and depth there to have guys step in and do that next man up.
The Rod Farva doesn't like Travis Etienne as an all-time great. Well, when you finish in the top 10 in the history of the sport in rushing and you've led your conference in touchdowns all time, I don't know, and we could go on and on and on and on. Yeah. What was his track record of winning, too? Let's see. 2 national championships and a national championship game and a playoff appearance the one time he didn't get to the national championship game, correct?
Only had more than 17 carries in a game 4 times in his career, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a stat for you.
Yeah, that's a pretty crappy career. I think we need to step it up. I think we need to figure it out. No, hey, I'll tell you this, man. What I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to seeing Will Shipley play. I was at the spring game, and I know spring games are spring games, and it's a glorified practice with a bunch of, people watching. There was something special about him, and that term gets thrown around a lot, especially on TV with some of the suits and ties. That drives me nuts. But I'm not joking. There was something special about Will Shipley. the way he carried himself, the way he would just reacted as he was playing, and I'm really looking forward to see him and see the energy that he brings to the field, because that's what Clemson needs right now. Clemson has all of this talent. I mean, I'm looking at the roster right now. It's unbelievable. I mean, I was forgetting guys that we have because we have so many players. But I believe we've kind of, and I've talked about this before, we've kind of fell into a lull. And we need that explosive player to take us to that place. And I think Shipley is definitely that guy. So Palmer, the question for me, as a Clemson fan, you see Pickens goes down. I mean, that's massive. We lost Justin Ross last year, and that was a slap in the head for us. Who do you really think, especially with the guy who came from LSU and just that guy you were talking about just a second ago, I forgot his name. Who do you really think is going to? Yeah, who do you think is going to really step up? And I mean, we've got a pretty good defense and be a good playmaker as far as in the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned two of them there that have been banged up a little bit recently. Kyrus Jackson and Jermaine Burton, both of them are expected to be healthy for this game. The one I would really look at would be Adonai Mitchell. He's a true freshman. Stepped in that spring game just a week or two after Pickens suffered the injury. The timing of it was, you never want to see a player get hurt, but I guess if you're Georgia and you realize, hey, this guy's hurt and you need to find a replacement, you need guys to step up. Spring practice is kind of the ideal time, and early spring practice too, because you've got the rest of the 2-3 weeks of it to continue to develop your team. Adonai Mitchell is a guy that I would look to there. He immediately stepped into that X receiver role that George Pickens was playing, and had 7 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown in the G-Day scrimmage. Seems to have great chemistry with quarterback JT Daniels. We spoke with Daniels after the game about that, and he completely agreed that what made George Pickens so special was the ability to just trust him and throw the ball up and trust that he would come down with it. He said a 50-50 ball is more of an 80-20 with George. And he kind of felt the same way about Mitchell, that, even in a short amount of time, those two guys built up great chemistry. And I think there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't have continued to build on that all summer and all fall camp. So he's certainly a guy that I would look towards to kind of step into that role. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint is another guy, bigger receiver, 4 catches, 62 yards, and a touchdown last year. Got injured on that touchdown and missed the final half of the season. And so, he's coming off of an injury, but from videos that we've seen, he was working on the field. It was a lower leg ankle injury. He was working on the field this spring, and from videos that we've seen posted, he's been out there and active this fall. All great reports about Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint and his ability to kind of step in. So those are certainly two guys, along with Kyrus Jackson and Jermaine Burton. Those are certainly two guys that I would look to fill into that bigger receiver role and play, step in to fill the shoes of George Pickens.
We're talking Clemson. We're talking Georgia. We're talking Georgia-Clemson. That's the matchup September 4th in Charlotte. Huge one. Best non-conference game on paper. No question about it. I don't think there's a debate there. The debate is who's going to win the game. And the debate also could be, guys, who needs this one more? Jason.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Clemson. They coming off of that loss to Ohio State, coming off of that loss to LSU. Those are two lopsided losses in a row in the playoff. You lose a third one to a big opponent like Georgia. That's going to be bad, especially from a perception standpoint. People are going to start piling on. What's happened to Dabo Swinney's program? What's happened to the Tigers? I think Clemson needs this game. I mean, honestly, both teams need it, but I think Clemson needs it a little bit more, from that kind of perspective. That they just can't take another loss on the big stage. That'd be the third straight loss to an SEC team, and that's that's just not something that's going to be easy to overcome. They'd have to hear that the rest of this season, the weakness of their schedule, people would pile on that. I just don't think Clemson can afford to lose this game from a perception standpoint.
I agree 100%. One of the things that I've talked about over the past, since the Ohio State game, was I said, if you want to talk about getting beat by an LSU team who had all-world talent, and just pause for 30 seconds, guys. I have to trash talk LSU for just a moment. It's a public service announcement. I told you that when you lost all that talent, you were going to suck, didn't I? I told you when your team couldn't even hold down the janitor that cleaned y'all's toilets that year. I told y'all were going to suck, and you ended up sucking. But back to it. You could come back and you could say that they lost to an all-world LSU team, and they did. All right. I'm not one for making excuses, but you can understand it. Ohio State came out and point blank said, our number one goal. I even had Ohio State fans tell me this verbatim on my channel. We did not care near about the national championship as much as we wanted to finally beat y'all. We were sick of last year. We're sick of 31-0. We're sick that we've never beat you guys. We're tired of it. And man, they came out and they did it. Of course, they followed that up by getting embarrassed by Alabama and proving that the only game they really cared about was us. So I agree with you 100%. If we don't, and I say we because I pull for them and so on, but I know I'm not on the field. If Clemson cannot win this game, and especially if Georgia for some reason should come out and win, in a dominating performance, we do have problems at Clemson. And there's the other side of the coin, it's kind of the schizophrenic side, Jason, and I'm thinking about West Virginia losing 70-33. That was one of the greatest things that ever happened to Clemson because we got Venables in, things started, turning, changing, blah, blah, blah. But this is a big game for Clemson. Georgia can lose this game and still be a contender. Clemson can lose this game, and I'm not so sure about that, no matter how well they play the rest of the season. So Clemson has to win this ball game. And if you look at the players they have, if you look at the players that Georgia's missing, like Pickens, I mean, that's a big deal. That's massive. And the injuries, Clemson should win this ball game. They should win this ball game. So if they don't, I think that they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out what is – and to me, it's a culture issue. So we'll have to see. But, gentlemen, I'm going to have to sign off. But, Mark, it's always good to see you, pal. Palmer, it's nice to meet you. And, Jason, I'll probably see you around Clemson sometime.
I'll be there, man. Take care, buddy.
Thanks,
Y'all
Brian.
take
You're
care.
always welcome, man. Have a good one.
Take care, guys.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, I guess I'll go at it now, and I'm going to go back on what Brian just said about, the fact that Clemson can lose this, the Georgia can lose this game, and they've still got, a chance to be competitive because you look down the line that, they should beat pretty much everyone else on their schedule. I think the only competition there would probably be Florida, and you win that game, you're the SEC East champion. You've got a chance to go into Atlanta and probably play an Alabama team. And if it's not Alabama, it's going to be someone else that's very highly rated and probably playoff bound. And you've got a playoff, essentially quarterfinal game there, a chance to play your way into the college football playoff and into that Final Four. So I do agree that Clemson probably needs this more from that perspective, that there's not another marquee game on the schedule that Clemson can fall back on and say, hey, we improved. We didn't beat Georgia, but look at it the way we finished the season, and we beat Virginia, North Carolina, Duke. I mean, there's some good teams, but there's not the same caliber of teams after Clemson in the ACC that the SEC has. Outside of Georgia with Florida and Alabama and Texas A&M and potentially LSU. So I do agree with that. I will say. Kind of going back to what you were saying about losing some of these games, a history of doing it, whether it was, the LSU game a couple of years ago, the Ohio State game last year. Georgia's got that too. And it has certainly, even more so than Clemson, has had the difficulty of winning the big game. And I think you go back to that 2017 season, 2018 national championship game. Georgia hasn't won a huge game since then. I mean, the Rose Bowl, the 2018 Rose Bowl game against Oklahoma was a huge win. But then since then, you lost to Alabama in the national championship game. The next year, you lose to LSU on the road in a marquee matchup on CBS. And then you get another chance at proving yourself against Alabama to the same setting, 2018 SEC championship game. The wheels come off there in the second half, and Georgia loses that one. They drop a game against South Carolina in 2019 that they probably shouldn't have. That a team that's elite does not drop. And then they get another chance to prove themselves in that 2019 SEC championship game, and they get run out of the building by LSU. They lose the bowl game in there to Texas. They won 2 bowl games, 2 New Year's Six bowl games over Baylor in the Sugar Bowl and over Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. But I don't think that for Georgia fans, I don't think that those 2 wins sit nearly as well as a win over Alabama, a win over LSU in one of those settings. And so I think Georgia needs this win from that perspective. Like I said, they've got opportunities. They've got the schedule that sets up well for them where they can lose this game and still have a chance to make the playoff. But just from a fan's perspective, from a I guess kind of the vibe around the program, if Georgia loses this game, that's another big game loss that Kirby Smart has on his record and on his resume. And that's just something that the Georgia fans would really like to avoid here. And there's no better way to start your season than winning a game. And it can, potentially be even bigger when you beat a top 5 team like Clemson. And so, I think from that perspective, Georgia really needs this game.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, Kirby Smart, he needs a big win too, no doubt about it. I think both of these, teams need this win. I mean, it's really, I guess it's just how you look at it. Both of these teams need this game, and they need it badly. And
that's what makes it so great.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about a playoff from the playoff perspective, because I don't think either team's knocked out of the playoff with a loss by any stretch. They may not control their own destiny, but I mean, both teams could go on to run the table and get in. A one-loss SEC champs surely not getting left out. One-loss ACC champs never been left out. So, I mean, I'm not even really talking about from a playoff perspective. I'm just talking about from perceptions. But, yeah, you make the very valid points. But both these teams need this game very badly. And like you say, that's part of what makes it, such a big game.
Yeah, I see the debate going either way in regards to who needs the game more, because on the Clemson side, if you're going to say Clemson needs this game more from the standpoint that, you both had made the point that Clemson is just not going to see an opponent unless things change radically and somebody jumps up as to be somebody we don't expect them to be. The Clemson, I don't believe that they've got another ranked opponent on the schedule, on the regular season schedule. No, they get to the ACC championship game. They're gonna hope, if they lose this game to Georgia, number one, the loser has to lose close. They have to be impressive. If this is a classic 38-35 game, then the committee's going to look at that and be like, if Georgia loses 38-35, Clemson goes on to beat Clemson, and they're sitting there at the end of the year 13-0, and they're number 1 or 2 in the country, they're not going to knock Georgia to 8. They're going to say, this is still one of the top 4 teams in the country. The 2 of the top 4 teams in the country just happen to play each other. So we're not going to penalize the loser because they showed that they can stand toe-to-toe. On the other hand, if it's 38-14, then that becomes a problem. Now, again, on the Clemson side, if they lose, the counter argument to that they don't have the opponent to make up for that, but they also don't have the opponent in their way. So as long as they go undefeated in the ACC, win the conference championship game, they're sitting there at 13-1, and they lost a close game to Georgia, they should be in good shape. Georgia, on the other hand, has the issue of whoever comes out of the West, and most likely Alabama, of they lose to Clemson, and even if it's a quote-unquote good loss or impressive loss, if they don't win the conference championship game, then maybe we're all sitting here saying Georgia's one of the best 4 teams in the country, but they just couldn't get picked because there are a bunch of one-loss conference champions. So by the way it's supposed to be done, looking at conference championships and looking at records, Georgia got left out. But man, they lost to Alabama by a field goal. They lost to Clemson by a field goal. Man, they kind of got screwed, but that's the way it happened. And certainly if Georgia wins this game, runs the SEC table, and then loses in decent fashion to Alabama, I still think they're going to be in good shape as a one-loss SEC runner-up that most likely lost to the best team in the country. I just think as long as it's a close game, neither one's in bad shape.
Yeah, neither team can afford to get their doors blown off. That's
no, can't have that. That does not look good, even if the other team goes on to be who we think they are. You can't have that. All right. Palmer, in regards to anything that we did not cover, I guess when you look at the ups and downs on this Georgia team in regards to strengths, and I'm not going to call them weaknesses. I don't think either team really has a weakness. They have units that aren't as great, that are just good versus great. And you match those up against what Clemson does really well. What gives you concern?
It's got to be the secondary. I mean, just looking at Georgia from the perspective of they've got so many things to replace there, and Clemson feeling confident in their receiving core, especially with Justin Ross returning. If he returns to the Justin Ross form that every college football fan knew and the defensive coordinators feared, that's a troublesome thought for Georgia. And ironically, you're probably going to see Darian Kendrick, former Clemson player, guarding Georgia, Clemson's top player, and so that would be a great matchup to see, a Kendrick and Ross battle. One that I'm sure that they had many a times in practice. I think so. That's where I would look as a big matchup. Another one that I would look at would be along when Georgia's on offense and they've got to go up against this incredible Clemson defensive line. I think any team should be concerned about going up against Clemson's defensive line. Regardless of whether it's the first game and you're replacing starters or you've got one of the strongest units in the country, I think Georgia can have one of the strongest units in the country. They've got the guys, they've got the talent to replace the guys that they're replacing. They're replacing Trey Hill at center. Well, like I said earlier, Cedric Van Pran appears to be the front runner there, and he's a former number 1 ranked center in the country for his signing class. They're replacing Ben Cleveland at right guard, and potentially have the ability to put Justin Schaefer at right guard, someone who started 10 games last season, 9 at left guard and 1 at right guard, and Jamari Salyer at left guard instead of left tackle, someone who started 9 games at left tackle and 1 at left guard. That would be one great way to replace him. In that scenario, though, you're looking at that left tackle position potentially being a weakness, potentially being a question mark. And I don't think that's what you want going up against this Clemson defensive line. I know that's not what you want going up against this Clemson defensive line. So you're probably going to see Jamari Salyer at left tackle, a guy that has played the position that they feel confident in, that's been battle tested, whether it was against Alabama or, the Florida, the rest of the SEC schedule. Salyer at left tackle is probably Georgia's best bet there, which would mean Justin Schaefer plays left guard. Like I said, Van Pran probably at center, and then Tate Ratledge at right guard. A guy that has been, if Justin Schaefer plays right guard and Ratledge is not in the starting lineup, those two will be rotating. If Schaefer plays left guard and with Salyer at left tackle, Ratledge is going to be the right guard. And so, it's almost, he could be the 6th man. He could be one of the starting 5. And that kind of depends on, where Jamari Salyer falls. But Ratledge being the former, a top 3 offensive tackle in his signing class, has moved inside to guard and found, to be, a very strong threat there, for Georgia. I think he's another great guy. And then at right tackle, you feel very confident with what you've got in Warren McClendon. Started 9 games for them last season. The last 9, they were working that position out and really found an answer with McClendon, who ended up earning freshman All-American honors as a redshirt freshman last season. So I don't know that that's necessarily a concern for Georgia as much as it is an interesting matchup to watch because of what Clemson brings defensively. But there's really, if you're Georgia, there's no better way to prepare for that than going up against the defensive line that they are every day in practice. Because if Clemson's the number 1 defensive line in the country, I really do think that Georgia has the number 2. And I think this game is, you could potentially, depending on how those 2 units play, you could make a case for Georgia to potentially have the best defensive line in the country with what they bring back in Jordan Davis, with what they bring back in Devontae Wyatt. With the guys that are stepping into larger roles in Trayvon Walker and Jalen Carter, that top 4 is one of the best in the country. And like I said, it may not be the best because of what Clemson's got, but if you're gonna be tested week 1 against that Clemson defensive line, there's no better way to prepare for that than what Georgia's got going against them every day in practice.
Hey, Jason, real quick, I'm just going to respond to this comment. So, Christopher, so basically, when I present the Clemson case of why the game means more to them, and then I present the Georgia case on why the game means more to them, that's not contradicting myself. All right, Jason, when you look at Clemson and, again, those units that aren't quite as great as some of the other units, look at Georgia. Where's your concern?
We got to start up front with that offensive line, obviously. Vastly underperformed last year. I've said it over and over. And now you're having to replace your left tackle, Jordan McFadden. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. Jordan McFadden's moving over from the right side to the left side. And he's a little shorter than your normal left tackles are, but he's got the length to make up for it. And I'm not concerned about him. I think he's going to be very good in that role. But then at left guard and center is where some of the questions come in. They got Matt Bockhorst at left guard, but you got to replace Cade Stewart at center. And the ideal situation would have been for Hunter Rayburn to be ready to take over that spot at center, but that's not the case. So Clemson's been having to let Bockhorst take snaps at center, and he, along with Mason Trotter, have been battling for that job throughout camp. That battle's gonna stretch on probably up into the game. But that's probably my biggest concern: the interior of that offensive line with Bockhorst, whoever plays center, and then Putnam, over on the right side at guard. I thought the interior of that offensive line just did not live up to expectations last year. They took their lumps. Hopefully they learned from it. And those guys have really – they came into the spring and they came into the fall, carried it over into the fall. With they had a chip on their shoulder. They heard all that talk. They talked about it multiple times in the spring. They heard it. And they want to prove that it was more – last year was more of an anomaly. But like he was just saying about Georgia, their offensive line going against that defensive line every day in practice. Iron sharpens iron. There's no better way to practice for a matchup like this than going up against a defensive line, with that kind of talent. And that's what this offensive line at Clemson's doing too. It doesn't matter which one's the best defensive line. They're both one of the top defensive lines in the country. So those offensive lines, they're matching up against elite level guys each and every day, and that's only going to make them better. My second concern would be the secondary. So I'm echoing what he said about Georgia. I got the same concerns about Clemson. Last time we saw Clemson, that secondary was just did not look good. I think Clemson was real beat up on the back end of the defense last year, and it really affected the way they played. I think not having to year in the weight room hurt some of those younger guys too. I thought some of those safeties looked undersized, and I think I've seen those guys in fall camp. They don't look like that this year. They just look different. They look like they've been in the weight room and putting in the work. And like guys like Landon Zanders and Joseph Charleston and R.J. Mickens, they just look better from a physical perspective. Now we have to see if that translates into their play on the field, because that safety core has got to be better than it was last year. Like Bobby was saying earlier, I'm not concerned about the corners. To me, it's more about the safeties. I think there's some questions to answer there. I think they got, the talent, but they got to prove it on the field. And I've really not seen that yet, not in a big game, not from this group that's currently on the roster now.
Now, Jason and Mark, let me ask y'all this. How do you think this game is going to play out in terms of, you've got the questions on the offensive line, guys that are being replaced, going up against an elite level defensive line both ways. So you feel like the front seven is probably going to control this game, stop the run, get after the quarterback. But then you've also got the questions in the secondary with some answers at wide receiver for both teams. Do you think this is one that's going to be high scoring, where teams are, both the teams are airing it out and putting up big points that way? Or do you think this could be a, slug it out kind of battle with the defensive line, front seven really dominating? Because I go back and forth. I think that there's a chance this could be a really low scoring game, and that those defensive lines and front sevens are dominating against the offensive lines, and that it's really hard to run the ball. I don't think either team's going to be able to run the ball all that well. And that, they're just making, it a nightmare for the quarterbacks? Or do you think that those offensive lines are going to be able to hold their own slightly, just enough to get those wide receivers and passing threats open downfield where, Georgia and Clemson are going to put up big points on the scoreboard?
Yeah, I'm like you. I kind of go back and forth. I can't really decide. If I had to pick right now, I lean more towards more of a lower scoring game. Like you said, the front sevens kind of dominate. Maybe might come down to which team's receivers can make one or two more plays out on the perimeter in space, make a guy in the secondary miss, break off a long run and score or whatever. And it could come down to special teams too, special teams in these low scoring games. If this is what this game is, special teams always seems to play a factor. And it could very well come down to a special teams play that decides this game. But if I had to sit here right now and make a prediction, I definitely lean more towards a lower scoring affair. I'm not saying 13-10 or anything like that, maybe both teams in the 20s. But that's what I would say right here today, just because of how good the front sevens are on each side of the ball. I think both of those front sevens are going to wreak havoc in this game.
I can see us going to halftime in like a 17-14 game that was mostly defensive dominated, but because the rush isn't going to get there every play, and there is potential to break free and make big plays in the passing game, that there's going to be 3 to 5 big plays that are going to be near scoring plays, either scoring plays or 45-yard, 50-yard plays that are going to, put somebody in scoring position, and you're going to see a bunch of 3 and outs, but when you see a play, you're going to see a play.
I kind of agree with you there. I don't necessarily see any long sustained drives, where a team's going 3 yards in a cloud of dust against one of these front sevens. But I'm with you. I think that both these teams have the weapons on offense that they could and match up very well against the defense that they're going up against, that they could hit on some big plays, and that's going to be kind of the deciding factor in this one.
Very well. That would not surprise me one bit either, especially what I was just talking about with Clemson secondary and those safeties, tend to get caught peeking in that backfield sometimes, especially the way Georgia likes to run the ball. I could easily see Georgia hitting 2 or 3 big plays over the top of this defense, and that could be the difference in the game.
Want to remind all of you of a few things here. We've got post-game shows here at the Voice of College Football. So all day on Saturday, for those of you who have been with us for at least a football season, I'm going to be camped out, providing all sorts of call-in shows and live streams throughout the day, typically between those big broadcast windows at the end of the noon games, after the end of those 3:30 games, and then into prime time and late night. Also, we're going to have post-game shows with too long of a list to provide here, but about 15 teams with post-game shows on our various channels. And so be looking out for that list of teams Unfortunately, no Georgia, no Clemson right now, but we do our best. So we'll be talking of Georgia Clemson right here, obviously, right after the game, big time. And also, we're doing a 24-hour live stream, 24 consecutive live hours leading into the college football season. So that's going to be late Wednesday night with the ball games on Thursday, headlined by Ohio State, Minnesota on Thursday night. We'll take it through for 24 consecutive hours live. And also keep in mind that these two will have their predictions available, including other media members and myself on Patreon. So join us on Patreon. Just look up Mark Rogers TV on Patreon. You can also grab the link in the description section and just go to Patreon. And for a mere 15 cents a day, you get media picks and picks from myself. You get Steve Merrill, handicapper from Wager Talk and Pro Sports Info, and his lock of the week. And also an insider look here at the Voice of College Football, and that one exclusive live stream per week per request. All right. Well, while we've taken down the path of how's this game going to play out, if it comes down to it, both kickers are very capable. They're not necessarily automatic, though. So, Palmer, I'll start with you. Jack,
Podlesny.
Had the big kick against Cincinnati. That was a 53-yarder with all the pressure on him to either you win or lose. It was a 1-point game. At that point, of course, they got the safety. So at least he's done it in the clutch in a game in which everybody's watching him, and he pulled through.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the special teams and kicking game, like Jason said, this one certainly could come down to, a big play in special teams, and whether it's, Georgia pinning them deep, and Jake Camarda, one of the best punters in the country, being able to put Clemson's offense in a position where they're uncomfortable, pinned up against their own goal line, or it's, like you said, Podlesny feeling comfortable hitting the big kick, whether it's, 50-something yarder, having to show the leg or something with the clock running down. I think Georgia feels very confident in their special teams and their capability to do that. I also think, it's certainly going to be interesting to watch, the way that Georgia's kick return game works out this year. Kenny McIntosh was back there. Kyrus Jackson was back there some. And they both showed potential to maybe bust off a big one. Georgia hasn't done it in a while. I think I could be wrong here, but one of the last kick returns was against Clemson and Todd Gurley. So I feel confident that Georgia feels confident in their kick return game and their special teams in general. So I'd certainly think that's an area where the Bulldogs would feel very confident if it came down to that.
Yeah, Clemson's another team that doesn't have a lot of, big returns, have made a lot of big plays in the return game. The practices I was at this fall, I saw Lynn J. Dixon, the freshman Will Shipley, both working a lot at punt return. I expect Dixon, to work some at kick return. I've heard Justin Ross has been working some at punt return. I don't know how true that is. Somebody told me that. I didn't actually see that. But that tells me Clemson's trying to get a little bit better in the punt return game. We usually see a lot of fair catches, even if they got 10 or 15 yards running room. Maybe we see them be a little bit more aggressive this season. As far as kickers go, Clemson's got a fifth-year punter. He feels like he's been there for 10 years. Will Spires. He doesn't have the strongest leg, but, he's usually going to punt the ball to where you can't return it. You have to fair catch it. And that's always a good thing if you got good return guys. But Clemson's, field goal kicker, B.T. Potter, going into his senior season, he's probably got one of the strongest legs in the country. Hasn't been, consistently consistent. Got a lot better last year. But, he can kick them from a long ways, well over 50 yards. How confident you would be in that with 3 seconds to go, needing a 55-yarder to win it, I don't know. It's certainly not 100% because we haven't seen him do it consistently. But he's certainly got the ability to do it. Let's put it like that.
Good stuff with Palmer Toms from Dogs 247 Sports. Catch his work right there, covering Georgia football on a regular basis. Dogs 247 Sports, Palmer Toms, and Jason Priester always joins us to talk Clemson. Jason, we hope you're feeling better. You said you're losing your voice, so.
Yeah, I've had a rough day today, man.
Oh man. Okay. Well, Jason doesn't have to talk anymore. You can catch his writing. He just has to hit the keyboard for allclemson.com on SI. Maybe we'll tap you for one other thing, Jason, maybe even two, but it doesn't have to be long. So, number one, I don't know if you guys are big on predictions. Well, you're going to have to be big on predictions because you're going to be giving me your predictions every week on Patreon. But besides that, I don't know if you're big on predictions. And if you definitely want to point everybody to your site, for a particular article where you're going to leave the prediction, I don't want to squeeze the prediction out of you here if you want to point people to your picks, but I was just curious if you've thought about it, gotten it down to a number, or you're still debating, or where are you with that, Palmer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of in that debating phase here where, like we said, I feel like, each and every day I kind of have a different feeling about this game, whether it's going to be a slugfest or a shootout, whether Georgia's going to come out on top or Clemson's going to come out on top. So it's certainly going to be interesting to follow. I think a lot of that, maybe my gut feeling is going to come down to how Georgia's injuries shake out and how they how healthy they are headed into the matchup. I know Vegas kind of has the number at Clemson -3, and I think that's probably a pretty good number there. I certainly would put Clemson as the favorite, but I don't think it's far from a guarantee that the Tigers are going to come out on top here.
Yeah, I could go either way, sitting right here today. I really could. I could see either team winning a 3 to 7 point game as we sit here right now. I go back and forth on it all the time, and how Georgia is health wise will probably play a big role in how I feel once we get closer towards the end of next week. But sitting right here today, it's still a little too early to tell for me.
And one other thing, Palmer, is there any angle to this game, any player, anything we missed? We want to squeeze this dry. Georgia Clemson preview. We want to provide everybody with the ultimate preview, one stop. Besides, of course, reading all your articles and Jason, all his articles, you got to do that too. But in regards to anything we've missed here, and if there's not anything, I ask you this question all the time. I do want a player, whether that's just one total or one on each side of the ball, that to gravitate to, just that you're intrigued by, that could break out and make big plays, and maybe not necessarily the obvious choice.
Yeah, I'll go with Darian Kendrick here. Someone that both fan bases are going to be pretty familiar with. I think with the questions that Georgia has in the secondary and the answers that Kirby Smart would love for Kendrick to bring, he's got that veteran presence that Georgia needed. I've said all along, it's not a lack of talent, it's a lack of experience that Georgia has in the secondary, and especially at corner. And Kendrick has that big game experience. But last time out, it wasn't the best of showings for him against Ohio State, and that's certainly something that he's going to want to, shake off. And what better way for him, personally, to do that than against his former team and some of his, classmates and teammates and friends that he battled against every day. And so I think that's an obvious one to watch, whether it's, just because of the Georgia Clemson, the transfer dynamic there, but also I think he is certainly a big piece in replacing some of the lost production for Georgia in the secondary, which is going to be big in a game that potentially could turn into a shootout, could turn into a defensive battle, but certainly one where Georgia's secondary is going to be tested.
What do you say, Jason? Anything that we've missed here, or anybody you want to highlight?
I'll give you a guy from each side of the ball. On offense for Clemson, the obvious choice would be Justin Ross. So I'm gonna go with somebody else and say running back Lynn J. Dixon. He's been patiently waiting his turn behind Travis Etienne. This is his time. There's a ton of talent behind him. There's just not much experience. There's Kobe Pace, who's a sophomore, who's shown flashes as a freshman, but the coaches have raved about during the spring and the fall. Same goes for the freshman Will Shipley. Dabo Sweeney called him the other day. He said he's already one of the most respected guys in the locker room, and that says something to me. But to me, I'm curious to see if Dixon can finally leave his mark on it, start to make his mark on this offense in this game. Because during his first 3 years here, I have yet to see anything that convinces me that he is an every down back at a premier program. I think he runs too high. I think he's not very good at creating running room when there's a lack of running room. If the hole's not there, then he's in trouble. So I think that if he is not taking a big step forward in his development, we could see Kobe Pace starting to get more carries as the game goes along. And we're going to definitely see Will Shipley get some. It's just a question of how many and what kind of packages they got in there for him. But to me, Lynn J. Dixon's a guy, to watch on offense to see how it plays out for him. And on defense, I'm going to go with Xavier Thomas. We've been waiting 4 years for this guy to bust out and have that monster season everybody's been waiting on since he got to Clemson. He is down to 263, 265, something like that. He says he feels as good as he's ever felt. Brent Venable says he's looked as good as he's looked since he's been on campus. They have really talked him up all fall. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Thomas on the field, in peak shape, in peak physical shape, and seeing what he can do, and what he can finally do in this defense.
See this here, Jason. Plenty of water. Stay hydrated. Okay? Lots of water, lots of fluids. Go crash for like 14 hours.
I've been doing that all day.
Okay. All right. I hate to hear you sound like that. I appreciate you being here.
No problem, man.
Thanks for taking one for the team, Jason. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Get some rest.
My pleasure, Mark.
Palmer, thank you so much. Always appreciate you being here, laying down the knowledge for us. And again, you can catch Palmer at Dogs247 Sports, Jason at allclemson.com. All right, everyone. That's our Big Georgia Clemson preview. And us, we will be posting content all the time and live streams, and my predictions are still coming your way team by team. Guys, it's been great. Appreciate you, and have a great night.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, folks. Appreciate you being here for this. I will check out the live chat just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And no, I'm not Jason Priester, but we appreciate Jason being here, taking one for the team, and Palmer, of course, and Brian here at the Voice of College Football. Quite the argument has been ensuing that I've been tracking in the live chat about overtime. I don't know why there's an argument about overtime. Steve, is that the Steve Dace? It can't be the Steve Dace. It's got to be just Steve Dace and whatever. Maybe it is. All right. So why no Buckeye leaves on the Ohio State helmet behind me? So it came with like 3, and it just seemed so weak and wimpy. It might not have been even 3. Might have been 2. And I sized it up, and I didn't want 2 poor little stickers on the Buckeye helmet. I just couldn't do it. So they're nowhere to be found. They're just gone. Just did away with them. All right. We've got a call for tie games versus the masses that say we got to play overtime to decide the winner. That's why those guys go out there, right? They want to decide who's better, who's going to win the game. Didn't think that was up for much debate. McD, good to see you, man. Anybody else in here? Good to see Mike 3883 and the Rod Farva. Got Rudy's here and OU Cat Bailey. This is the first time I believe I've seen your handle. So welcome to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Would love to know who you root for. Looks like Clemson by the looks of that score and how long you've been watching. But you are OU Cat Bailey. So is that Oklahoma? OU Oklahoma. But Cat, Bobcats, OU? I'm going to guess Oklahoma. Clemson wins 54-22. 50. Those injuries are hurting the dogs for sure. Don't see anything else here. Appreciate everybody being here. Let's see. This is late on a Monday night. We will have prediction videos coming your way. We've got Arizona State coming up tonight, and a number of them going to be released. I just recorded Illinois, Florida State, West Virginia, and Michigan to be released soon. Illinois, Florida State, West Virginia, Michigan predictions coming your way in the next 12 or 15 hours. And, of course, we go live tomorrow night with Nebraska live at 8 o'clock Eastern time on the Nebraska channel. All right, folks, it's been great. Appreciate you being here. Georgia Clemson should be a great one. We're going to do more of these. We are lining up UCLA LSU live preview. We are lining up Ohio State Minnesota live preview. We're lining up Iowa Indiana, huge game in the Big Ten week 1. I don't think it's getting enough love. Iowa Indiana live preview. Anybody else we should hit? Anyway, big week 1 games. Anytime we can do this and bring in contributors from both sides, I think it's a fun time. Alabama, Miami, of course, would be one to get as well. Right here at the Voice of College Football. See you for Nebraska Live Tuesday at 8. Meanwhile, voiceofcollegefootball.com. Check out the store right there, voiceofcollegefootball.com.